7 years ago, the man Mila loved vanished without a word. Tonight, he walked back into her dying cafe as Chicago's most dangerous crime lord, and the look in his eyes told her he'd been hunting for her all along. She thought she'd escaped her past. She was wrong. He found her. And men like Lucien Moretti don't let go of what belongs to them. If you want to see how far obsession can burn, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels.
But
Rain came down in sheets against the cracked windows of Rosie's cafe, turning the neon signs outside into bleeding watercolor streaks across the glass. Mila Hartwell moved behind the counter like she'd done it 10,000 times before. Because she had. 26 years old and her hands already looked older, knuckles red from scrubbing coffee stains and grease. Fingernails clipped short because anything else was impractical when you worked doubles 6 days a week. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and old grease, the kind of place that survived on regulars too stubborn to admit the coffee tasted like battery acid. Mila didn't care. It paid rent. Barely. The tips covered groceries if she stretched them thin enough, ate ramen 4 nights a week, walked instead of taking the train. She wiped down the marble counter for the 3rd time that hour, watching the rain hammer the empty street outside. It was almost midnight. Her shift ended at 1. Then she'd walk 12 blocks home to a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling and a landlord who'd started leaving eviction notices under her door. Chicago didn't care if you were tired. It just kept taking. You gonna wipe a hole through that counter, or can I get a refill? Mila glanced up at Marcus, one of the regulars, 60-something, smelled like cigarettes and cheap whiskey, always sat in the corner booth reading yesterday's sports section. She grabbed the coffee pot without answering, walked over, filled his cup. "You look like hell, kid," Marcus said. "Thanks. You're a real charmer." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" Mila didn't answer. Sleep was a luxury. She'd learned that the hard way after her mother died 3 years ago, leaving behind medical bills that could have bought a house in the suburbs. Mila paid them anyway. Every cent. Because that's what you did when you were the only one left. She walked back behind the counter, dumped the coffee pot back on the burner, and checked the clock. 47 minutes until closing. Then cleanup. Then the walk home in the rain because she'd sold her car 2 months ago to cover rent. The bell above the door chimed. Mila didn't look up immediately. Customers this late were usually drunks looking for coffee to sober up, or cabbies killing time between fares. She grabbed a menu, turned toward the door, and opened her mouth to say the same thing she always said. The words died in her throat. Because standing in the doorway, rain dripping off a black coat that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, was a ghost. Lucien Moretti. For a second, Mila forgot how to breathe. He looked different. Older. Sharper. The boy she remembered, 20 years old with paint-stained hands and a smile that made her believe the world could be kind, was gone. In his place stood a man carved from something harder. His jaw was clean-shaven, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes the same stormy gray she used to lose herself in, but colder now, emptier, like something vital had been burned out of him. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, broad-shouldered and silent, wearing dark suits that didn't hide the bulges under their jackets. They moved like soldiers, like predators. They scanned the cafe with the kind of practiced efficiency that said they'd done this before, in places a lot more dangerous than a dying diner on the south side. Lucien's gaze found hers, and the room changed temperature. Mila's hands tightened around the menu until the laminated edges bit into her palms. Her heart slammed against her ribs. 7 years. 7 years since he disappeared without a word, without a note, without a single explanation. 7 years of wondering if he was dead, if she'd imagined the whole thing, if the love she thought they had was just a stupid girl's fantasy. And now he was standing in her cafe like a king surveying a ruin. Mila. His voice hadn't changed. Deep, rough around the edges. The kind of voice that used to whisper her name in the dark while his hands traced her spine. She couldn't speak. Lucien stepped forward. The 2 men stayed by the door, hands folded in front of them, eyes never stopping their scan of the windows, the street, the shadows outside. "You gonna say something?" Lucien asked. "Or just stare at me like I'm a hallucination?" Mila's throat unlocked. What are you doing here? Having coffee. Bullshit. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. You always did have a mouth on you. And you always had an excuse for everything. Mila set the menu down before she ripped it in half. Get out. No. Lucienne, I said no. The air between them crackled. Marcus had gone silent in his booth, staring at them like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. The two men by the door hadn't moved, but Mila could feel their attention shift, sharpening, waiting for orders. I don't know what you want, Mila said quietly, but you're not welcome here. Lucien tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You think I don't know that? You think I don't know you probably dream about putting a knife in my chest for what I did? I don't dream about you at all. Liar. Heat rushed up Mila's neck. You've got about 10 seconds before I call the cops. Lucien laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Go ahead. Call them. See what happens. Something in his tone made her stomach drop. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty, the kind of certainty that came from knowing the rules didn't apply to you. Who the hell are you now? Mila whispered. Lucien's expression shifted. For just a second, something raw flickered across his face. Grief, maybe, or regret, before the mask slammed back into place. Someone you don't want to know. Then why are you here? Because I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. We have everything to talk about. Lucien stepped closer. The marble counter was the only thing between them now. I know you're drowning, Mila. I know about the eviction notices, the medical bills, the double shifts. I know you sold your car. I know you haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I know. Stop. Mila's voice cracked. How do you... I've been watching you. The words landed like a punch. Mila stared at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. What? For 7 years, Lucien said quietly, I've been watching you, making sure you were safe, making sure nobody touched you, making sure you're insane. Probably. Get out. Mila's hands were shaking now. Get the hell out of my cafe before I scream. Lucien didn't move. I'm not leaving without you. You don't get to do this. You don't get to vanish for 7 years and then walk back in like, I had no choice. Everyone has a choice. Not me. Lucien's voice turned hard. Not then. Not when my father got his throat cut in a warehouse on the docks and half the city wanted me dead before sunrise. Not when every second I stayed near you put a target on your back. Not when loving you made you a liability I couldn't afford. Mila went very still. Lucien's jaw worked. You want the truth? Fine. My father was the head of the Moretti family. You know what that means in this city. And when he died, I inherited everything. The business, the blood, the enemies, all of it. Overnight, I was 20 years old and suddenly responsible for an empire built on fear and violence and things I can't ever wash off my hands. You're lying. I wish I was. Mila's chest felt tight. Your father sold insurance. You told me. I told you what I needed you to believe so you'd stay safe. Lucien's eyes were burning now. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to become the thing I am now? I was going to marry you, Mila. I had the ring. I was going to take you away from this city, leave the family, start over somewhere clean. And then my father died and everything went to hell, and the only way to keep you alive was to disappear. So you just left. Yes. Without a word. Yes. Without giving me a choice. Lucien's hands curled into fists on the counter. If I told you the truth, you would have tried to stay, and they would have killed you to hurt me. So I made the choice for both of us. Mila laughed bitterly. How noble. It wasn't noble. It was survival. For you. For you. Lucien leaned forward. Do you have any idea what I've done to keep you safe? The people I've had to deal with, the threats I've had to neutralize? You're alive because I made sure of it. You're standing here hating me because I loved you enough to destroy myself instead of dragging you down with me. I don't believe you. Then believe this. Lucien pulled something from his coat pocket and set it on the counter between them. Mila stared at it. A photograph. Faded. Creased. 7 years old. Her and Lucien on the lake shore, his arms around her waist, her head thrown back, laughing at something he'd said. They looked impossibly young, impossibly happy. I've carried that every day, Lucy said quietly. Through every meeting, every deal, every decision I had to make that turned me into something I hate. You were the only good thing I ever had, and I gave you up because keeping you meant killing you. Mila's eyes burned. She wouldn't cry. Not for him. Not after everything. Why now? Her voice came out hoarse. Why show up after 7 years? Because the threats are gone. Because I've built something strong enough to protect you. Because I'm tired of watching you from a distance, like a ghost haunting the only thing I ever loved. I'm not yours to protect. You've always been mine. Lucien's voice dropped to something dangerous. And I've always been yours. That didn't change just because I walked away. You don't get to decide that. Then decide for yourself. Lucien straightened. Have dinner with me, one night. Let me explain everything. And if you still want me gone after that, I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I want you gone now. Liar. Mila's breath hitched. Because he was right. Damn him, he was right. Underneath the anger and the hurt and the betrayal was something she'd spent 7 years trying to bury. Something that woke up the second he walked through that door. One dinner, Lucien said. That's all I'm asking. And if I say no, then I'll keep asking until you say yes, because I'm not losing you twice. Mila closed her eyes. This was insane. He was insane. She should throw him out, call the cops, even if they wouldn't help, and never think about him again. But she'd spent 7 years thinking about him anyway. 7 years wondering what happened, 7 years hating him and missing him in equal measure. One dinner, she heard herself say, and then you leave me alone. When she opened her eyes, Lucien was smiling. It wasn't the boyish grin she remembered. It was sharper now, colder, but underneath it she could still see traces of the man she'd loved. Tomorrow night, Lucien said. I'll pick you up at 8. I didn't give you my address. I already have it. Of course he did. Lucien turned toward the door, his men falling into step behind him. But before he left, he looked back at her one more time. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I never stopped. He cut himself off, shook his head, and then he was gone, disappearing into the rain with his silent shadows, leaving Mila standing behind the counter with her heart in her throat and her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the marble to stay upright. Marcus whistled low from his booth. Friend of yours? Mila didn't answer, because she didn't know what Lucien was anymore, and that terrified her more than anything. The next day crawled by like glass scraping across skin. Mila went through the motions, made coffee, took orders, smiled at customers who didn't tip, but her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere 7 years in the past, tangled up in memories she'd spent half a decade trying to forget. She'd met Lucien in a painting class at the community center. He'd been 20, she'd been 19, and he'd spent the entire first session staring at her instead of his canvas. Afterward, he'd walked up to her with paint on his hands and asked if she wanted to get coffee. She'd said yes. 3 months later, she was in love. 6 months after that, she couldn't imagine her life without him. And then one morning, he was just gone. No note, no call, no explanation. Mila had spent weeks thinking something terrible had happened to him. She'd gone to the police, filed a missing persons report, called everyone she could think of. Nothing. It was like Lucien Moretti had never existed. Eventually, she'd had to accept the truth. He'd left her. Simple as that. Except it wasn't simple, because now he was back, telling her stories about crime families and death threats and protection, and part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to believe he'd loved her enough to walk away. But the other part, the part that had survived 7 years of loneliness and heartbreak, knew better. People didn't love you and leave you. They just left. By the time her shift ended, Mila had almost talked herself out of going. Almost. She walked home through streets slick with yesterday's rain, climbed 4 flights of stairs to her apartment, and stood in the doorway staring at her closet like it held the answers to the universe. She didn't own anything nice. Everything she had was functional, practical. Bought secondhand or on clearance because that was all she could afford. But somewhere in the back, shoved behind 3 years of worn-out jeans and faded t-shirts, was a dress she'd bought for a job interview that never happened. Simple. Black. Nothing special. It would have to do. Mila showered, dried her hair, put on the dress, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, pale, like someone who'd been running on empty for too long. She almost laughed. This was ridiculous. She was getting ready for a dinner date with a man who claimed to be a crime lord, who'd stalked her for 7 years, who'd broken her heart so completely she'd spent half a decade putting the pieces back together. And she was doing it anyway. At exactly 8 o'clock, a knock echoed through her apartment. Mila froze. For a wild second, she considered not answering, just sitting here in the dark until he left. But then the knock came again. Patient, inevitable. She opened the door. Lucian stood in the hallway wearing a suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. He looked her over slowly, his expression unreadable. "You look beautiful," he said. Mila's throat tightened. Don't. Don't what? Don't look at me like that, like we're still those kids by the lake. We're not. Lucian's gaze held hers. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten what it felt like to be them. Mila grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. Let's get this over with. Lucien's mouth twitched, still charming as ever. Still full of shit as ever. He actually laughed at that. And for just a second, Mila saw a flash of the boy she remembered. Then it was gone. Lucien led her downstairs to where a black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. One of his men, the same ones from last night, opened the rear door. Mila hesitated. "You're safe with me," Lucien said quietly. "That's what I'm afraid of." But she got in anyway. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Lucien slid in beside her, and the door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded way too final. The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into traffic. Mila stared out the window, watching her neighborhood blur past. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted." "That's not ominous at all." Lucien smiled faintly. "I'm not going to hurt you, Mila. You already did." The smile vanished. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, leaving the south side behind, cutting through downtown, climbing into neighborhoods Mila had only seen in magazines. The buildings got taller, cleaner. The people on the sidewalks wore clothes that cost more than her car used to. Finally, the SUV pulled up in front of a restaurant that didn't have a sign. Just a single red door with a man in a tuxedo standing guard. Lucien got out first, then offered Mila his hand. She ignored it and climbed out on her own. The man at the door nodded at Lucien. "Mr. Moretti, your table is ready." Inside, the restaurant was all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place where every table had fresh flowers and the silverware probably cost more than Mila's monthly grocery budget. A woman in an elegant dress led them through the main dining room, where every head turned to watch Lucien pass, and into a private room in the back. One table, 2 chairs, a view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Mila sat down slowly, her pulse hammering. Subtle. I don't do subtle anymore. Lucien took the seat across from her. I do effective. Is that what this is? You being effective? This is me trying to explain 7 years in one night. A waiter appeared with wine. Mila didn't even see him arrive, poured 2 glasses, and vanished just as quickly. Lucien leaned back in his chair, watching her with that same unsettling intensity. Ask me anything. Why should I believe you? Because I've never lied to you, not once. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Lucien picked up his wine glass but didn't drink. When I told you I loved you, I meant it. When I told you I wanted to marry you, I meant it. When I told you I'd do anything to keep you safe, I meant that too. And when you left, I meant that most of all. Mila's chest ached. You could have told me the truth. And what would you have done? Stayed with me? Watched me turn into this? Lucien gestured at himself like he was something diseased. I was 20 years old, Mila. My father got murdered, and suddenly I was responsible for 200 men who'd kill without hesitation if I gave the order. I had enemies on every corner, cops on my payroll, judges in my pocket. I was drowning in blood, and I couldn't drag you under with me. So you just decided for both of us? Yes. That's not love, Lucien. That's control. His jaw tightened. Maybe. But you're alive. So I'll live with being controlling. Mila stared at him across the table. What do you want from me? Everything. The word came out raw, honest. I want everything I walked away from. I want you back in my life, in my bed, in my world. I want to wake up next to you and know you're real. I want... He stopped, took a breath. I want what I should have had 7 years ago. You can't just come back and... I know. Lucian set down his glass. I know it doesn't work like that. I know you probably hate me. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking anyway. Because the alternative is spending the rest of my life watching you from a distance, and I can't do that anymore. You've been watching me for 7 years. Why stop now? Because it's killing me. Lucian's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Every time I see you struggling, every time I see you exhausted, every time I see you alone, it kills me. And I know I did that to you. I know I'm the reason you've been surviving instead of living. So let me fix it. You can't fix this with money. I'm not trying to. Lucien leaned forward. I'm trying to give you a choice. Stay in that apartment, keep working doubles, keep barely surviving, or let me take care of you the way I should have been doing all along. Mila laughed bitterly. You want me to be your kept woman? I want you to be mine, however that looks. I'm not a possession. No, you're the only thing I've ever had worth keeping. The words hung in the air between them. Mila's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. I don't know you anymore. Then get to know me again. The boy I love doesn't exist. No, he doesn't. Lucian's expression went dark. He died the same night my father did. But pieces of him are still here, buried under everything else. And they only wake up when I'm near you. That's not enough. I know. Then why are we doing this? Lucian held her gaze. Because I need you to understand that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than taking over the family. Harder than making my first kill. Harder than every brutal decision I've had to make since. And I did it anyway because I loved you more than I loved myself. Mila's breath caught. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Lucien continued quietly. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm still worth something. That underneath all the blood and violence, there's still a man who loves you, who's always loved you, who'll spend the rest of his life trying to earn back what he threw away. Mila closed her eyes. This was insane. All of it. She should walk out right now, go back to her apartment, never see him again. But when she opened her eyes, Lucien was still watching her with an expression that looked like hope and desperation twisted together. And she realized with a sick jolt of clarity that she'd already made her decision the moment she got in his car. 1 month, she heard herself say. Lucien went very still. You get 1 month, Mila said, to prove you're not the monster you think you are, to show me the pieces of the boy I loved. And at the end of that month, I'll decide if I stay or walk away forever. No arguments, no second chances. Done. The answer came so fast it made her head spin. That easy? Mila asked. That easy. Lucien's expression shifted into something almost predatory. Because a month is all I need. Mila's pulse kicked up. You're that confident? I'm that desperate. And somehow, that honesty was worse than any lie. They ate dinner in relative silence after that, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. Lucien asked about her life. Careful, probing questions that told Mila he already knew the answers and was just testing to see if she'd be honest. She was. She told him about her mother's death, the medical bills, the double shifts, the eviction notices, the slow grinding exhaustion of trying to survive in a city that didn't care if you lived or died. Lucien listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. I should have been there, he said finally, but you weren't. I know. After dinner, Lucien drove her home. Not the penthouse she'd half expected, just back to her apartment, the SUV idling at the curb while rain started to fall again. Tomorrow, Lucien said, I'll pick you up after your shift. For what? You'll see. Mila shook her head. You're impossible. You have no idea. She reached for the door handle, but Lucien caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving me a chance I don't deserve. Mila pulled her hand free. Don't make me regret it. I won't. She climbed out of the SUV and walked toward her building, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. When she reached the door and looked back, the SUV was still there, engine running, Lucienne a dark silhouette behind the tinted glass. Watching, always watching. Mila went inside, climbed the stairs, locked herself in her apartment, and stood with her back against the door, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. What had she just agreed to? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Sleep well, Mila. Tomorrow, I'll show you who I really am. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it and turned off her phone. Because tomorrow was going to change everything, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the man Lucien Moretti had become, or the pieces of herself she'd buried when he left. Mila didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the couple upstairs scream at each other through paper-thin walls, her mind racing through every possible version of tomorrow until exhaustion felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. By the time dawn bled gray light through her window, she'd convinced herself to cancel. By the time she got to work, she'd changed her mind again. The cafe was busier than usual. Morning rush, commuters grabbing coffee before disappearing into the loop. Mila moved through the chaos on autopilot, pouring drinks, taking orders, smiling at people who didn't see her as anything more than the woman holding the coffee pot. She'd always been invisible. Even before Lucien left, even when she thought she mattered to someone, the world had a way of reminding her she was just background noise in other people's stories. Except Lucien had looked at her last night like she was the only person in the room. Like she'd always been the only person in the room. And that terrified her more than anything he'd said about crime families and death threats. Her shift ended at 6. She cleaned up, changed out of her grease-stained apron, and stood outside the cafe with her heart in her throat, watching traffic crawl past in the fading light. The black SUV appeared at exactly 6:15. Same vehicle, same tinted windows, same silent driver who climbed out and opened the rear door without a word. Mila got in. Lucien was waiting, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a crime lord and more like the boy she remembered. But the eyes were wrong, too sharp, too aware. Like he was cataloging every breath she took, every micro-expression that crossed her face. "Where are we going?" Mila asked. "My home." Her stomach dropped. That wasn't part of the deal. "You wanted to know who I am now." Lucien's gaze held hers. "You can't understand that from a restaurant table. You need to see where I live, how I live, what my world actually looks like. And if I say no, then I'll take you back to your apartment and we'll try again tomorrow." He paused. "But you didn't come here to say no." Mila's jaw tightened. "You think you know me that well? I know you haven't stopped shaking since you got in this car. I know your pulse is hammering so hard I can see it in your throat. I know you're terrified and furious and curious all at once." Lucien leaned closer. "And I know you're going to say yes anyway because you've spent 7 years wondering what happened to me. Now you get to find out. You're an arrogant bastard. I'm honest. That's not the same thing." "It is with me." Mila wanted to argue, wanted to throw his certainty back in his face, but he was right. She hated that he was right. "Fine," she said. "Show me." Lucien smiled. Not the cold, controlled version from last night. Something sharper, hungrier. "You won't like what you see." "I already don't like you." "Liar." The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into evening traffic. They drove north, leaving the city behind, cutting through suburbs that grew progressively wealthier until the houses became estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. 40 minutes later, they turned onto a private road lined with trees that blocked out the sky. The SUV slowed at a guardhouse where 2 men in dark suits checked the vehicle before waving them through. Mila's chest tightened. "You have guards?" "I have a lot of guards." "How many?" "Enough." The road curved through manicured grounds that looked like something out of a magazine. Perfectly trimmed hedges, sprawling lawns, gardens lit by soft landscape lighting that made everything look unreal. And at the center of it all, rising like a monument to wealth and power, was a house that made Mila's breath catch. It wasn't a house. It was an estate. 3 stories of stone and glass, wings spreading out on either side of a central entrance, windows glowing with warm light. The kind of place that belonged to oil tycoons and old money families, not 27-year-old men who'd inherited a criminal empire. The SUV stopped in front of the main entrance. Lucien got out first, then offered his hand again. This time, Mila took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, steady. And for just a second, she was 19 again, walking along the lakeshore with paint on her hands and hope in her chest. Then the memory shattered, because standing on the steps leading to the entrance were 4 men in suits, hands folded in front of them, eyes scanning the perimeter with military precision. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge Mila, just watched Lucien with the kind of deference that said he owned them completely. Inside, Lucien said quietly. Mila followed him through the front door into a foyer that belonged in a museum. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor, artwork on the walls that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. "This is where you live?" Mila's voice came out hoarse. "This is where I work." Lucien led her through the foyer into a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds. "I have an apartment in the city, but most of my business happens here." "What kind of business?" Lucien poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and handed her one. "The kind you don't want details about." "You said you'd be honest." "I am. You don't want details." He took a drink. "But I'll give you the broad strokes if that's what you need." Mila gripped the glass so hard she thought it might shatter. "Tell me." Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he set down his drink and walked to the windows, staring out at the darkening grounds. "My family has controlled the South Side for 3 generations, he said quietly. Gambling, loans, protection, import-export operations that don't go through official channels. We move product the city doesn't want traced. We handle problems the police can't solve. We make people disappear when they become inconvenient." Mila's stomach churned. "You kill people." "I give orders. Other people pull the trigger." "That's the same thing." "No." Lucien turned to face her. "It's worse, because I don't have the excuse of following orders. Every death that happens under my watch is my decision, my responsibility, my weight to carry." "How many?" "How many what?" "How many people have died because of you?" Lucien's expression went flat. "You really want that number?" Mila forced herself to hold his gaze. "Yes." 37. The number landed like a physical blow. 37 people, Lucien continued, his voice empty of emotion, who either betrayed the family, threatened our operations, or tried to kill me first. I signed off on every single one. I watched some of them happen. I pulled the trigger myself twice when the situation required it. Mila set down her glass before she dropped it. "You're a murderer." "Yes. And you expect me to just—" "I don't expect anything." Lucien crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. "I told you you wouldn't like what you saw. This is who I am now. This is what I became to survive, to protect what's mine, to keep people like you safe from people like me." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to." His voice dropped. "You wanted the truth. Here it is. I run a criminal organization that makes millions every year through illegal channels. I have judges in my pocket, cops on my payroll, politicians who owe me favors they can't refuse. I'm responsible for violence and corruption and things that would make you sick if I laid them all out. And I did it because the alternative was dying in a warehouse with my throat cut like my father." Mila's hands were shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what you're getting into if you stay." Lucien's gray eyes burned into hers. "This isn't some fantasy where the bad boy gets redeemed by love. I'm not going to magically become a good man because you're back in my life. The blood doesn't wash off. The choices don't unmake themselves. I am what I am. And if you can't live with that, tell me now so I can let you go." "You said you'd never let me go." "I lied." The words cracked something open in Mila's chest. "What?" "If staying with me means watching you hate yourself for loving a monster, I'll let you go." Lucien's jaw worked. "I'll hate every second of it. I'll probably spend the rest of my life half dead because of it, but I won't keep you in a world that destroys you. I did that once. I won't do it again." Mila stared at him. At this man who'd killed 37 people, who ran an empire built on fear, who'd spent 7 years watching her from the shadows like a ghost she couldn't shake. And underneath all of it, she could still see fragments of the boy who'd held her hand by the lake. "Show me the rest," she heard herself say. Lucien went very still. What? You brought me here to see your world, so show me. All of it. Don't hide anything. Mila, you said I needed to understand. Fine. Make me understand. For a long moment, Lucien just looked at her. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Come with me. He led her through the house, down a corridor lined with more artwork than Mila had seen in her entire life, to a door at the end of the hall. Lucien pressed his palm against a biometric scanner. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was an office that looked like a command center. Monitors covered one wall, showing live feeds from cameras positioned all over the estate. Phones lined a desk that could have seated 10 people. File cabinets filled with documents Mila was pretty sure she didn't want to read. And in the corner, a gun safe that probably held enough firepower to start a small war. 3 men were inside, bent over a table covered with maps and photographs. They looked up when Lucien entered, their expression shifting from focused to wary in the space of a heartbeat. Out, Lucien said. They didn't argue. Just gathered their materials and filed past Mila without making eye contact, closing the door behind them. Mila walked to the monitors, staring at the feeds. You watch everything. I have to. Too many people want me dead to leave anything to chance. How do you live like this? Carefully. Mila turned to face him. Don't you ever get tired of it? The paranoia, the violence, the constant watching? Every day. Lucien leaned against the desk, his expression weary. But tired doesn't change reality. This is the life I inherited. The empire I'm responsible for. The people who depend on me to keep them safe and employed and protected. I don't get to walk away because I'm tired. Why not? Because walking away means chaos. It means every rival family descending on the south side like vultures. It means the people who've been loyal to my family for decades getting slaughtered in the power vacuum. It means innocent people caught in the crossfire. So you're trapped. We're all trapped by our choices. Lucien's gaze found hers. I just made mine with my eyes open. Mila crossed her arms. What about me? What choice do I get in all this? Any choice you want. Stay, leave, hate me, love me. I won't stop you either way. You said you'd keep asking until I said yes. I lied about that too. Mila's breath caught. Why? Because seeing you in this room, in this world, Lucien's voice went rough. I realized I can't do it. I can't drag you into this and pretend it's anything other than selfish. You deserve better than a man who has blood on his hands and enemies at every corner. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life. Safety. Peace. You don't get to decide what I deserve. Someone has to. You're too stubborn to do it yourself. Fuck you. Lucien smiled faintly. There she is. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm just remembering why I fell in love with you in the first place. He straightened. You never backed down from anything. Not from me, not from life, not even when you should have. Maybe I should back down now. Maybe you should. But Mila didn't move, because standing in this room surrounded by evidence of everything Lucien had become, she could finally see the truth beneath all the violence and power. He was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhausted, the kind of tired that came from carrying too much weight for too long with no end in sight. When's the last time you slept through the night? Mila asked quietly. Lucien blinked, clearly not expecting the question. What? You heard me. When's the last time you slept without waking up to check the cameras or answer the phone or deal with some crisis? I don't remember. That's what I thought. Mila moved closer. You act like you're this untouchable crime lord, but you're falling apart. I can see it. The way you hold yourself too rigid. The way your hands shake when you think I'm not looking. You're not invincible, Lucien. You're just good at pretending. I don't have the luxury of falling apart. Everyone has that luxury. You're just too stubborn to take it. Stubborn, Lucien laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been working yourself to death for 7 years instead of asking for help. It means you sold your car and skipped meals and ignored eviction notices because you're too proud to admit you're drowning. We're both stubborn, Mila. That's the problem. I didn't have a choice. Neither did I. They stared at each other across the room, the air thick with 7 years of anger and grief, and longing twisted together so tightly Mila couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. "This is insane," she whispered. "I know. I should leave. I know. But I'm not going to." Lucien's expression shifted into something raw, desperate. "Why?" "Because I spent 7 years hating you, and now I'm standing in your office surrounded by proof that you're exactly the monster you said you were. And I still—" Mila stopped, shook her head. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. You're giving me a chance." "A chance at what? Redemption?" "There's no redemption for 37 bodies." "No, there's not." Lucien crossed the room until only a few feet separated them. "But maybe there's a chance at something honest, something real. No more lies, no more hiding. Just two broken people trying to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." "That's not a fairy tale." "I don't want a fairy tale. I want you." The words hung between them like a blade. Mila's chest ached. "You can't just—" "I know. I know I can't walk back in and expect you to forget everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway. Because you're the only thing that's kept me human through all of this. Every decision I made, I thought about you. What you'd think, what you'd say. Whether I could live with you knowing what I'd become. You were the voice in my head telling me not to cross certain lines. That's too much weight to put on me." "I know, but it's the truth." Mila closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Lucien was still watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "One question," she said. "Anything. If you could go back 7 years, knowing everything you know now, would you still leave me?" Lucien didn't hesitate. "Yes." The answer gutted her. "Because," he continued quietly, "the alternative was watching you die. And I'd rather live the rest of my life hating myself than spend even 1 second in a world where you don't exist." Mila's throat closed up. "But," Lucien added, "if I could do it over, I'd tell you the truth first. I'd give you the choice. I'd let you know that leaving was destroying me just as much as it was destroying you. Would that have changed anything?" "No. You'd still be alive. I'd still be here. But at least you'd have known I didn't walk away because I stopped loving you." Mila's hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her thighs to hide it. "This is too much." "I know. I can't. I know." "Stop saying that." "Then tell me what you want me to say." Mila laughed, but it came out broken. I don't know what I want. I don't even know why I'm still here." "Yes, you do. Don't tell me what I—" Lucien moved. 1 second he was across the room. The next he was right in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body, smell the expensive cologne he wore, see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. "You're here," he said quietly, "because you feel it too. This thing between us that never died, even when it should have. You hate me. You probably should hate me. But underneath all that anger is the same thing I've been carrying for 7 years. Which is? Hope." His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw so gently it made her chest ache. "Hope that maybe we're not completely broken, that maybe there's still something worth fighting for." Mila should have stepped back, should have pushed him away, should have done anything except stand there letting him touch her like she was something precious instead of the wreck she'd become. But she didn't move, because his touch felt like coming home, and she'd been homeless for 7 years. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Probably. We're going to destroy each other." "Maybe." "Lucienne." He kissed her. Not rough, not desperate, just soft and achingly gentle, his lips brushing hers like he was afraid she'd break if he pressed too hard. And Mila shattered anyway. She kissed him back with 7 years of loneliness and heartbreak and fury pouring out of her all at once. Her hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer, needing to feel something other than the grinding exhaustion that had been her constant companion since he left. Lucien made a sound low in his throat, relief and hunger and something that sounded like grief. And deepened the kiss, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly until her toes barely touched the floor. It was too much. It wasn't enough. Mila broke away, gasping, her pulse hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. "We can't—" "I know. This doesn't fix anything. I know. Then why? Because I've been dying without you. Lucien's forehead pressed against hers, his breathing ragged. And for 30 seconds, I got to feel alive again. Mila's eyes burned. She wouldn't cry, not for him, not after everything, but tears came anyway. Lucien saw them, and something in his expression cracked. Don't. Please don't cry. I'm not crying. You're a terrible liar. I learned from the best. He flinched like she'd slapped him. Mila pulled out of his arms, wiping at her face with shaking hands. I need to go. Mila, I need to go. I can't think when I just need space. Lucien stepped back immediately, hands dropping to his sides. I'll take you home. No, I'll call a cab. It's 40 minutes back to the city. I'm not letting you. But you don't get to let me do anything. Mila's voice came out sharper than she intended. I'm not yours, Lucien. Not anymore. Maybe not ever again. So stop acting like you have any say in what I do. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. There's a car waiting outside. Driver's name is Marco. He'll take you wherever you want to go. No questions. Thank you. And Mila? She stopped at the door, not turning around. For what it's worth, Lucien said quietly, I meant every word. About all of it. Mila didn't answer. She walked out of the office, down the corridor, through the foyer, and out into the night where Marco was already waiting by a different SUV, door open, expression carefully neutral. She got in without looking back. The drive back to the city passed in a blur. Mila stared out the window, watching the estates give way to suburbs, give way to the urban sprawl of Chicago, her mind spinning in circles that went nowhere. She'd kissed him. After everything he'd told her, after learning he'd killed 37 people, after seeing the empire he'd built on blood and fear, she'd kissed him anyway. And the worst part was she wanted to do it again. By the time Marco dropped her off at her apartment, Mila felt like she'd been awake for 3 days straight. She climbed the stairs on autopilot, unlocked her door, stepped inside, and froze. Someone was sitting in her kitchen. A woman. Mid-30s. Blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing a business suit that screamed money and power. She looked up when Mila entered, her expression cold and assessing. Mila Hartwell, the woman said. It wasn't a question. Mila's heart slammed against her ribs. Who the hell are you? How did you get in here? My name is Elena Voss, and I'm here to give you some advice. The woman stood, smoothing her skirt. Stay away from Lucien Moretti. Mila's mouth went dry. Excuse me? You heard me. Stay away from him, for your own good. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the person who knows exactly what Lucien is capable of. Elena moved closer, her heels clicking against the cheap linoleum. I'm the person who's watched him build his empire, who's seen the bodies pile up, who knows that everyone he gets close to ends up destroyed one way or another. Get out of my apartment. Not until you understand what you're walking into. Elena's eyes were ice blue and merciless. Lucien Moretti is not some misunderstood anti-hero waiting to be saved by love. He's a sociopath who uses people until they're no longer useful. And when that happens, they disappear, just like his father, just like everyone who's ever tried to leave the family. Mila's pulse was roaring in her ears. You don't know anything about him. I know he's been watching you for 7 years. I know he's orchestrated this entire reunion. I know he's playing you like a violin, and you're too blind to see it. You're lying. Am I? Elena pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Mila. On the screen was a photograph. Mila standing outside the cafe. The date stamp was from 3 years ago. He's been watching you, Elena said quietly. Tracking your movements, monitoring your life, planning this exact moment. You think this is fate? You think he just happened to walk into your cafe? He owns the building, Mila. He's owned it for 5 years. He's been controlling every aspect of your life without you even knowing it. The floor seemed to drop out from under Mila's feet. No. Yes. Elena pocketed her phone. Lucien Moretti doesn't do anything by accident. Every move is calculated. Every word is manipulation. And you're just another piece on his board. Mila's hands clenched into fists. Why are you telling me this? Because unlike Lucien, I actually care about collateral damage. Elena headed for the door. Stay away from him. Change your locks. Disappear if you have to, because if you don't, you're going to end up like everyone else who got too close. And what's that? Elena paused in the doorway, looking back over her shoulder. Dead. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving Mila standing alone in her apartment with her world tilting sideways. Lucien owned the building. He'd been watching her for 7 years. He'd orchestrated everything. Mila's phone buzzed, a text from Lucien. Are you home safe? She stared at the message until the words blurred. Then she threw her phone across the room and watched it shatter against the wall. Mila didn't go to work the next day. She sat on the floor of her apartment surrounded by the shattered remains of her phone, staring at the wall where Elena Voss's words echoed like a death sentence on repeat. He owns the building. He's been watching you. He orchestrated everything. The sun rose. The sun set. Mila didn't move. She tried to make sense of it, tried to find the version of events where Lucien wasn't a monster playing puppeteer with her life. But every memory she touched felt poisoned now. The cafe where they'd reunited, owned by him. The apartment she'd lived in for 3 years, controlled by him. The eviction notices that always came but never quite forced her out, managed by him. 7 years of thinking she was surviving on her own. 7 years of being watched like an experiment in a cage. Around midnight, someone knocked on her door. Mila didn't answer. The knocking continued, persistent, patient. Mila. Lucien's voice filtered through the cheap wood. I know you're in there. Marco said you got home safe, but you haven't responded to any of my messages. She still didn't move. Please. His voice dropped lower. Just let me know you're okay. You don't have to talk to me. Just knock on the door or something so I know you're alive. Mila's hands clenched against her thighs. Part of her wanted to scream at him through the door. Part of her wanted to open it and demand the truth. Part of her wanted to disappear into the floor and never surface again. She did none of those things. After 10 minutes, Lucy's footsteps retreated down the hallway. Mila waited until she heard the building's front door close before she finally stood on legs that barely held her weight. She walked to the window and looked down at the street below. The black SUV was still there, parked directly across from her building, engine running. Lucien stood beside it, staring up at her window like he could see through the darkness and brick straight into her soul. Their eyes met across the distance. Mila stepped back from the window and closed the blinds. She heard the SUV door slam. The engine returned the vehicle pulling away into the night. Only then did she let herself breathe. But the next morning, Mila called in sick to work for the 2nd day in a row. Her manager sounded pissed, but she didn't care. She had bigger problems than losing a job that barely paid rent. She needed answers, and there was only one person who seemed willing to give them. Mila dug through the clothes scattered across her floor until she found the jeans she'd worn last night. Elena's business card was still in the pocket. Thick, expensive cardstock with nothing but a name and phone number embossed in silver. Mila called before she could talk herself out of it. Elena answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd reach out. We need to talk. I agree, but not over the phone. Do you know the Riverwalk near Millennium Park? Yes. Meet me there in an hour. Come alone. And Mila? Elena's voice hardened. Check for surveillance before you leave. Lucien doesn't let his possessions wander unsupervised. The line went dead. Mila stood in her apartment for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was insane. Meeting with a stranger who'd broken into her home based on nothing but paranoia and accusations that might be completely fabricated. But Elena had shown her a photograph Lucien shouldn't have had unless everything Elena said was true. Mila got dressed in clothes that didn't smell like 3 days of sitting on the floor. She checked her face in the bathroom mirror, pale, hollow-eyed, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight, and decided she didn't care. Before leaving, she did something she'd only seen in movies. She checked her apartment for cameras. It took 20 minutes of searching every corner, every smoke detector, every electrical outlet. She found nothing. But the absence of proof didn't make her feel better. Lucien had access to resources she couldn't even imagine. If he wanted to watch her, he didn't need obvious cameras. He just needed to own the building. Mila left through the back exit, cutting through an alley she'd never used before, doubling back twice to make sure nobody was following. The paranoia felt ridiculous, but Elena's warning kept playing on repeat. Check for surveillance. The Riverwalk was busy even on a weekday morning. Tourists taking pictures, joggers doing their morning runs, vendors selling coffee and pastries from carts. Mila found Elena sitting on a bench overlooking the river, wearing sunglasses and a coat that probably cost more than Mila made in 6 months. Elena didn't look up when Mila sat down beside her. "You weren't followed," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know?" "Because if you were, we'd already be having a very different conversation." Elena finally turned to face her. "I'm glad you called. You broke into my apartment." "I picked the lock. There's a difference." "Not legally. Legality is a luxury I can't afford when dealing with Lucien Moretti." Elena pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. "How much did he tell you?" "About what?" "About why he left you 7 years ago." Mila's jaw tightened. "His father was killed. He inherited the family business. He thought staying near me would get me killed." "And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's a lie." Elena leaned back against the bench. "Or at least it's not the whole truth. Lucien's father wasn't murdered by rivals. He was executed by his own organization. A coup orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to be loyal to him." Mila's stomach dropped. "What?" Giovanni Moretti was losing control, getting sloppy, making enemies faster than he could eliminate them. So his captains decided to remove him before he destroyed everything they'd built. They made it look like a rival hit, clean, professional. And then they offered Lucien a choice. What choice? Take over the family and clean up his father's mess or die beside him. Elena's expression was carved from ice. Lucien chose power. He spent the next year consolidating control, eliminating anyone who questioned his authority, and building the empire you saw last night. Your tragic romance backstory? It's marketing, a story he tells himself to justify the monster he became. Mila shook her head. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Then explain how a 20-year-old art student with no criminal experience managed to take control of one of Chicago's most dangerous organizations overnight. Explain how he knew exactly who to kill, who to threaten, who to buy off. Explain how someone that young earned the loyalty of men twice his age, who'd been in the life since before he was born." "He learned fast." "Nobody learns that fast. Not unless they were already being groomed for it." Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through several files before handing it to Mila. Giovanni Moretti started training Lucien when he was 15. By the time you met him, he'd already been involved in the family business for 5 years. The painting classes, the sweet artist persona, that was his cover, a way to stay clean while his father handled the dirty work. On the phone screen was a photograph of a younger Lucien, maybe 17 or 18, standing beside his father outside a warehouse. Both of them were holding guns. Mila's hand started shaking. "He lied to you from the beginning," Elena said quietly, "about who he was, what he wanted. You were never his escape from the life. You were his alibi. A normal girlfriend with a normal life who could testify that Lucien Moretti was just a sweet boy who liked to paint if anyone ever came asking questions." "Stop. I know it hurts, but you need to hear this." "Why?" Mila thrust the phone back at Elena. "Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why go through all this trouble to warn me about Lucien?" Elena's expression shifted into something complicated. Grief and anger and regret all twisted together. "Because 7 years ago, I was you." The words landed like a gunshot. Mila stared at her. "What?" "I was Lucien's fiancée before you even met him." Elena's voice went flat, mechanical, like she was reciting facts to avoid feeling them. "We were together for 2 years. He proposed. I said yes. I thought I was marrying the man I loved. And then Giovanni was killed and Lucien showed me who he really was." "What happened?" "He offered me the same choice he's offering you now. Stay and become part of his world, or leave and never look back. I chose to leave. And he let me go. But not before making it very clear that if I ever told anyone what I knew about the family, I'd disappear like everyone else who betrayed him." Mila's chest felt tight. "If that's true, why are you here? Why risk telling me any of this?" "Because I've watched Lucien destroy every person who got close to him for 7 years. Business partners, friends, rivals. Anyone who threatened his control or his image or his carefully constructed narrative about being a tragic king forced into violence by circumstances beyond his control. Elena's hands clenched into fists. And now he's coming for you, and I can't watch him do it again. You don't know that, don't I? He owns your building, Mila. He controls your job. He's been monitoring every aspect of your life for years. You think that's love? That's obsession. That's a man who views you as property, not a person. And the second you stop being useful, Elena stopped, took a breath. I've seen what happens when Lucien gets bored. When the chase is over and reality sets in, and he realizes the fantasy he built in his head doesn't match the person standing in front of him. What happens? They disappear. Sometimes, literally. Sometimes they just become ghosts walking around in their own lives, too broken to function, too afraid to leave. Mila stood up abruptly. I need to go. Wait, I need to think. I can't do this right now. Elena stood too, grabbing Mila's wrist. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't go back to him without understanding what you're walking into. Mila pulled her hand free. I don't owe you any promises. No, but you owe yourself the truth. Mila walked away without answering, her mind spinning so fast she felt dizzy. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop and lean against a building, gasping for air like she'd been running. Everything Elena said made horrible sense. The way Lucien had known exactly where to find her, the way he'd controlled every aspect of their reunion, the way he spoke about his empire with the confidence of someone who'd been preparing for it his entire life, not someone thrust into it overnight. But it also contradicted everything she'd seen in his eyes last night. The exhaustion, the guilt, the desperate need for something real. You couldn't fake that kind of pain, could you? Mila's phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd bought a replacement that morning. Cheap, prepaid, same number. A text from Lucien. I know you're angry, I know I fucked up, but please let me explain. Meet me tonight, same place, I'll tell you everything. Mila stared at the message. Then she typed back, Who is Elena Voss? The response came within seconds. Where are you? Answer the question. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, someone who wants me dead. Don't believe anything she tells you. Why should I believe you instead? Because I've never lied to you about what I am. Manipulative? Yes. Controlling? Probably. But everything I told you about why I left, about what I feel for you, about the man I became, that was real. You own my building. A longer pause this time. Yes, you've been watching me for 7 years. Yes, you orchestrated our reunion. No, that was luck, or fate, or whatever you want to call the universe finally giving me a second chance. I owned the building because I couldn't stand the thought of you being homeless if you couldn't make rent. I watched you because I needed to know you were safe. But walking into that cafe was the first time I'd been within 100 feet of you in 7 years. Mila's hands were shaking so hard she could barely type. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then don't believe anything. Come meet me tonight and look me in the eye while I tell you the whole truth. Every piece, every lie, every manipulation, and then decide for yourself who I really am. What if I decide you're exactly what Elena says? Then I'll let you go. For real this time. No more watching. No more interference. You'll never see me again. Mila stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed, Where? My estate. 8 o'clock. I'll send Marco. No, I'll drive myself. Send me the address. Another pause. Then, You don't trust me. Should I? No, probably not. But I'm going to prove you wrong anyway. The address came through a moment later. Mila pocketed her phone and started walking. She had 8 hours to decide if she was brave enough or stupid enough to walk back into Lucien Moretti's world with her eyes wide open. At 7:30, Mila stood in her apartment staring at the clothes laid out on her bed. She'd changed outfits 4 times already. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt like armor strong enough to survive whatever was about to happen. Finally, she settled on jeans and a sweater. Practical. Unremarkable. The kind of thing you wore when you needed to run. She left her apartment at 7:45 and caught a cab instead of taking the train. The driver didn't ask questions when she gave him the address, just programmed it into his GPS and pulled into traffic. The drive took 45 minutes. By the time the cab dropped her at the front gate of Lucien's estate, Mila's pulse was hammering so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. The guard at the gate waved her through without checking ID, because of course Lucien had told them she was coming. The main house loomed ahead, all lit windows and stone facades that looked like something out of a crime drama. Mila parked in the circular drive and sat in the cab for a full minute before finally getting out. Lucien was waiting on the front steps. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His hair was disheveled, his clothes, usually immaculate, were wrinkled like he'd slept in them. Dark circles carved shadows under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. "You came," he said. "Don't sound so surprised." "I wasn't sure you would." Mila walked up the steps until only a few feet separated them. "Elena told me everything. About your father, about how he trained you, about how you weren't some innocent kid forced into violence. You were being groomed for it your entire life." Lucien's jaw tightened. "And you believed her?" "I don't know what I believe. That's why I'm here." "Fair enough." Lucien gestured toward the door. "Come inside. I'll tell you everything." Mila followed him into the house, through the foyer, past the sitting room where they'd kissed, down a corridor she hadn't seen before. Lucien led her into a library that looked like it belonged in a mansion from the 1800s. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a fireplace crackling with real flames. He poured 2 drinks without asking, handed her one. Mila set it down without drinking. "Talk," she said. Lucien took a long pull from his glass. Then he set it aside and met her eyes. "Elena's not wrong," he said quietly. "My father did train me. Started when I was 15. By the time I met you, I'd already been involved in family business for years. I knew how to handle a gun, how to read a ledger full of illegal transactions, how to spot a wire or a tail or a cop pretending to be something else." Mila's stomach twisted. "So you lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." Lucien ran a hand through his hair. "The painting classes were real. I loved art. I was good at it, and being the artist kid gave me cover when my father needed me to stay clean. But yeah, I knew what he did. I knew what I was being prepared for. He stopped, took a breath. "I didn't think it would happen so soon." "What changed?" "I met you." Lucien's expression shifted into something raw. "And for the first time in my life, I wanted out. I wanted to be the person you thought I was. The sweet artist kid with paint on his hands and dreams about opening a gallery someday. I wanted normal. I wanted safe. I wanted you." "But you couldn't have it." "No. Because 3 months after I proposed, my father got himself killed, and everything I'd been preparing for my entire life came crashing down around me." Lucien's hands clenched into fists. "Elena told you it was a coup. She's right. My father was getting sloppy, making enemies, putting everyone at risk. So his captains decided to remove him before he destroyed the family. And they came to you. They gave me a choice. Take over or die with him. So I took over. And I spent the next year doing exactly what Elena said, eliminating threats, consolidating power, becoming the thing I'd been trained to be." He paused. "But she's wrong about one thing." "What?" "You weren't my alibi. You were my reason." Lucien's voice dropped. "Every decision I made, every line I crossed, every person I had to eliminate, I did it thinking about you. About keeping you safe, about building something strong enough that nobody could ever use you against me." "So you left." "So I left. Because the alternative was watching you become a target, watching every rival family in Chicago try to hurt me by hurting you. I couldn't live with that. So I walked away and spent 7 years making sure you were protected, even if you never knew it." Mila's chest ached. The building, the job, all of it. All of it. Lucien stepped closer. "I bought the building because your landlord was a piece of shit who'd have evicted you the second you missed one payment. I made sure the cafe stayed open because you needed the income. I kept threats away from you before they ever got close enough for you to notice. You think that's control? Fine. Maybe it is, but it kept you alive. You don't get to make that choice for me. I know. And if I could go back, I'd do it differently. I'd tell you the truth, give you the choice. Let you decide if you wanted to live in my world or walk away clean. But I can't go back. I can only move forward. And moving forward means being honest about everything." "Then be honest." Was Elena your fiancée? Lucian's expression went carefully blank. Yes. The confirmation felt like a knife between her ribs. For how long? 2 years. I was 18 when we met, 20 when I proposed, and 20 when I called it off. Why? Because I didn't love her. Lucian's voice was flat, empty. I thought I did. She was beautiful and smart and understood the life in a way most people couldn't, but it wasn't real. It was just convenient, safe, something my father approved of. And me? You were everything she wasn't. Real, honest, someone who looked at me and saw a person instead of a position. He paused. Elena hates me because I chose you over her, because I broke off our engagement to be with you. And when my father died and I had to walk away from you too, she saw it as proof that I was incapable of love. Are you? The question hung between them like a blade. Lucian held her gaze. I don't know. Maybe. I've done things that should have killed whatever humanity I had left. But then I see you, and something wakes up inside me that's been dead for 7 years. So either that's love or I'm just obsessed with the idea of who I used to be when I was with you. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Mila turned away, staring into the fireplace. Elena said you make people disappear when they stop being useful. Elena's projecting. I let her go, gave her money, made sure she was protected. She's alive and free because I chose to let her walk away clean. But other people weren't that lucky. No. Lucien's voice hardened. Other people betrayed the family, stole from us, tried to kill me. Those people disappeared because that's what happens in my world when you cross certain lines. But Elena? I never touched her, never threatened her. I just refused to keep pretending I felt something I didn't. Mila closed her eyes. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then don't believe anything, just... Lucien's voice cracked. Just stay. For tonight. Let me show you the parts of me Elena doesn't know exist. The parts that only wake up when you're here. And if you still think I'm the monster she says I am, I'll drive you home myself and you'll never see me again. Mila turned to face him. Why does it matter so much? You have everything. Power, money, control. Why do you need me? Because everything else is empty. Lucian closed the distance between them. I have an empire. I have men who die on my order. I have more money than I'll ever spend, but I wake up every morning in a house that feels like a mausoleum, and the only thing that makes it bearable is knowing you're out there somewhere, alive and safe, even if I can't have you. That's not healthy. I never said it was. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. But it's the truth. You're the only thing that's kept me human through all of this. And if you walk away tonight, I don't know what happens to the parts of me that are still worth saving. Mila should have stepped back, should have left, should have listened to every instinct screaming that this man was dangerous and broken and exactly what Elena warned her about. But she didn't move, because standing this close to him, she could see the truth Elena couldn't. Lucien Moretti wasn't a monster pretending to be human. He was a human being who'd become a monster to survive. And somewhere underneath all the blood and violence and carefully constructed walls was the boy she'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. One night, she heard herself say. Lucien's expression shifted into something between relief and desperation. One night. And in the morning, I decide. In the morning, you decide. Mila took a shaky breath. Show me who you really are. No more walls, no more protection. Everything. You might not like what you see. I already don't like most of what I've seen, but I need to know the whole truth before I can make a real choice. Lucian studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and stepped back. Come with me. He led her deeper into the house, down a staircase she hadn't noticed before, into what looked like a private wing. They passed more guards, silent, watchful, until finally Lucian stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. This is my private study, he said quietly. Nobody comes in here except me, not my captains, not my guards, nobody. What I'm about to show you could get me killed if the wrong people found out. Then why show me? Because you asked for everything, and I'm done hiding from you. He opened the door. Inside was a room that looked nothing like the rest of the house. No expensive furniture, no artwork. Just a desk covered with files and documents, a wall lined with photographs, and in the corner, an easel holding a half-finished painting. Mila stepped closer to the photographs, and her breath caught. They were all of her, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, taken over years. Mila walking to work, Mila sitting in the park, Mila laughing with friends who'd since moved away, Mila alone in her apartment window, backlit by cheap yellow light. "This is what Elena would call obsession," Lucian said quietly from behind her. "And she'd be right. I watched you for 7 years, documented your life like a stalker, convinced myself it was protection when really it was just—" He stopped. "I needed to see you, even from a distance, even knowing I could never have you again. It was the only thing that kept me sane." Mila's hands were shaking. "This is insane. I know. You've been spying on me. Yes. For 7 years. Yes." She turned to face him. "Why are you showing me this? This makes you look like exactly what Elena said you were. Because it's the truth." Lucien's expression was carved from exhaustion and something that looked like surrender. "I'm not going to lie about who I've become. I'm not going to pretend I'm some noble protector who kept his distance for your own good. I was selfish, obsessed, completely fucked up about the whole thing. And if that makes you hate me, fine. At least you'll hate me for the right reasons." Mila walked to the easel. The painting was of the lakeshore, the same spot from the photograph in his wallet, but instead of 2 figures, there was only one. Her, standing alone on the sand, staring out at the water. "I started that 3 years ago," Lucian said. "Never finished it. Couldn't figure out how to paint you without making it look like a shrine. It already looks like a shrine." "I know." Mila turned back to the wall of photographs. "You said this could get you killed. Why?" "Because it proves I have a weakness. And in my world, weaknesses get exploited. If my enemies knew how much you meant to me—" He stopped, shook his head. "That's why I stayed away. Not just to protect you, to protect myself, because if anyone found out about you, they'd use you to destroy me. And I couldn't risk that." "But you're risking it now, because you're already back in my life. The secret's out, and hiding it anymore just makes it worse." Lucien moved closer. "So yes, I'm showing you everything. The obsession, the control, the completely irrational need to keep you safe even when you didn't know I existed. And if that makes you run, fine. At least you'll know exactly what you're running from." Mila stared at him. At this man who'd built an empire and killed 37 people and spent 7 years watching her from the shadows like a ghost that couldn't let go. And she realized with a sick jolt of clarity that Elena was right about one thing. This wasn't love. It was something darker, more complicated, more dangerous. But it was also the closest thing to honest she'd seen from him. "I need air," she whispered. Lucian stepped aside immediately. "There's a terrace through that door. I'll wait here." Mila walked past him, through the door he'd indicated, out onto a stone terrace that overlooked the estate's back gardens. The night air was cold enough to burn her lungs. She stood there for a long time, staring out at manicured lawns and distant tree lines, trying to process everything she'd just seen. The photographs. The painting. The years of surveillance disguised as protection. It was too much. All of it was too much. Behind her, she heard the door open. Footsteps on stone. "I know what you're thinking," Lucian said quietly. "Do you?" "You're thinking I'm exactly what Elena said. A sociopath who's manipulated your entire life, and you're probably right." He moved to stand beside her, close enough to touch but not touching. "But here's what she doesn't understand. I never wanted to be this person. I didn't choose it. I inherited it, and the only way to survive was to become something capable of living in this world." "That's not an excuse." "No. It's an explanation." Lucian's hands gripped the terrace railing. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to understand that underneath everything I've become, there's still a part of me that remembers what it felt like to be clean, to be good, to be someone worth loving, and that part only exists because of you." Mila's throat tightened. "That's not fair." "I know. You can't put that on me. I can't be responsible for—" "You're not responsible for anything." Lucien turned to face her. "I'm just telling you the truth. Take it or leave it. Stay or go. Whatever you decide, it won't change the fact that you're the only thing I've ever had worth keeping." Mila opened her mouth to respond, and then the night exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from somewhere in the gardens. Shouts, running footsteps, more gunfire. Lucien moved before Mila could process what was happening. He grabbed her arm, yanked her away from the railing, shoved her toward the door. Inside, now. What's happening? We're under attack. Move! They burst back into the study just as the door to the hallway slammed open. 3 of Lucien's guards rushed in, weapons drawn. Sir, we have multiple breaches on the perimeter, one of them said. At least 20 hostiles, professional, coordinated. Lucien's expression went cold, predatory. Lock down the house, get every man on the grounds mobilized, and get her to the safe room. No. Mila grabbed his arm. I'm not leaving you. This isn't negotiable. Neither am I. More gunfire, closer this time. Glass shattered somewhere in the house. Lucien turned to his guards. Safe room, now. Full detail on her. Nobody gets through. The guards moved toward Mila. She tried to pull away, but they were faster, stronger, trained for exactly this kind of situation. They grabbed her arms, not rough, but not gentle either, and started dragging her toward a hidden panel in the wall. Lucienne! Mila struggled against their grip. Don't you dare! I'm sorry. His voice was empty, final. But I'm not losing you tonight. The panel slid open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. The guards pulled Mila through. The last thing she saw before the panel closed was Lucien picking up a gun from his desk and checking the magazine with movements so practiced they looked like muscle memory. Then the panel slammed shut, and Mila was being dragged down the stairs into a room that looked like a bunker. Concrete walls, reinforced door, monitors showing live feeds from cameras all over the estate. On the screens, she could see men in tactical gear moving through the gardens, gunfights erupting in the hallways, bodies dropping on both sides. And in the center of it all, Lucien Moretti moving through the chaos like he was born for it, firing, reloading, advancing, completely calm, completely in control, completely the monster Elena had warned her about. Mila sank into a chair, her hands shaking, and watched the man she thought she knew transform into something she didn't recognize, and realized with horrifying clarity that there was no going back from this. Whatever choice she made in the morning, nothing would ever be the same again, because tonight, she'd seen the truth. Lucien Moretti wasn't a man trying to be good despite his circumstances. He was a predator who'd found something worth protecting. And predators didn't change. They just found new things to hunt. The monitors in the safe room showed hell breaking loose across the estate. Mila sat frozen in the chair, watching Lucien move through the chaos with a precision that made her stomach turn. He wasn't panicking, wasn't hesitating. He fired his weapon with the same casual efficiency most people used to check their email. 2 shots. Center mass. Moved to the next target. 3 bodies dropped in the hallway outside his study. 4 more in the foyer. Lucien reloaded without breaking stride. Jesus Christ, one of the guards beside Mila muttered. The other one, older, gray at the temples, shook his head. I've been with the family for 20 years, never seen him like this. Like what? Mila's voice came out hoarse. Focused. He usually delegates this shit, stays in the command center and gives orders. But tonight? The guard gestured at the screen. Tonight he's hunting. On the monitor, Lucien rounded a corner and came face to face with 2 attackers in tactical gear. He didn't even slow down, just raised his gun and fired twice. Both men crumpled. Lucien stepped over them like they were debris. Mila's hands clenched against her thighs. How many are there? At least 20 when they breached, the younger guard said. Maybe more outside the perimeter. This is coordinated, professional. Someone with serious resources and serious balls to try hitting us on our own ground. Who would do that? The older guard's expression went dark. Someone who wants Lucien dead bad enough to risk a war. The monitors flickered. One of the feeds went dark, then another. They're taking out our cameras, the younger guard said. He grabbed his radio. Command, this is Safe Room 1. We're losing visual. What's your status? Static. Then a voice crackled through, barely audible over background gunfire. Perimeter is compromised. Multiple breaches on the east and south walls. Sir is engaging hostiles in the main house. All units converge on... The transmission cut off. The older guard swore under his breath. We need to move her. Move me where? Mila stood. This is supposed to be the safe room. It is. But if they're taking out cameras, they're looking for something specific. And you're the only thing in this house Lucien would die to protect. The words landed like a punch. They're coming for me. Mila whispered. That's the working theory. The older guard moved to a panel on the wall and punched in a code. A hidden compartment opened, revealing more weapons and tactical gear. Get a vest on, now! Mila's hands shook as she pulled on the ballistic vest he tossed her. It was heavy, uncomfortable, made everything feel more real in a way that made her want to throw up. The younger guard was at the monitors, watching what feeds remained. Sir's moving toward the west wing. He's, shit, contact, multiple hostiles. On screen, Lucien disappeared around a corner. Gunfire flashed. Bodies fell. But this time, Lucien stumbled. Mila's heart stopped. Is he hit? Can't tell. The angle's wrong. The younger guard leaned closer to the screen. He's still moving, still engaging. But Lucien was bleeding. Mila could see it now, dark stains spreading across his left shoulder, dripping down his arm. We need to get to him, Mila said. Negative. Our orders are to keep you here. Fuck your orders. He's bleeding. He's handled worse. The older guard chambered a round in his rifle. Right now, our job is keeping you alive. That's what he'd want. I don't care what he'd want. I care about... An explosion rocked the safe room. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, dim red LEDs that turned everything into shadows and blood. The older guard grabbed Mila's arm. We're moving, now! What about the monitors? Monitors are dead. Command is dead. We're on our own. He pulled Mila toward a door she hadn't noticed before. Another hidden panel, this one leading to what looked like a maintenance tunnel. This goes to the garage. We get you in a car and off the property before the main door to the safe room exploded inward. Not with another bomb, with a battering ram. The younger guard opened fire immediately, his rifle barking in the enclosed space loud enough to make Mila's ears ring. The older guard shoved her toward the tunnel entrance. Go! I'm not leaving you! You don't have a choice! 3 men in tactical gear stormed through the ruined door. The younger guard dropped one. The older guard got another. But the third one, faster, better trained, put 2 rounds in the younger guard's chest. He went down hard. The older guard spun, firing, but his rifle clicked empty. The tactical operative raised his weapon. Mila didn't think. She just moved, grabbed the only thing within reach, a chair, and swung it with every ounce of strength she had. It connected with the operative's head, not hard enough to knock him out, but hard enough to stagger him. The older guard used the opening to draw a sidearm and fire. The operative dropped. For 3 seconds, the room was silent except for ragged breathing and the ringing in Mila's ears. Then the older guard grabbed her hand and pulled her into the tunnel. They ran. The tunnel was narrow, dark, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. Mila's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. The vest weighed her down like a millstone. Behind them, more footsteps, shouts. They were being followed. The older guard pulled her around a corner, then another, until the tunnel opened into what looked like an underground parking garage. 3 vehicles sat waiting. Armored SUVs, engines already running. Get in the middle one, the guard said. Driver's already... A gunshot cracked through the garage. The older guard jerked forward, a red bloom spreading across his back. He fell. Mila screamed. More operatives emerged from the tunnel behind them, 4 of them, moving with military precision. Mila ran for the SUV, threw herself into the back seat, slammed the door, and froze. The driver wasn't one of Lucien's men. It was Elena Voss. She turned in the driver's seat, gun pointed directly at Mila's chest. Hello again. Mila's heart stopped. What? Seatbelt, Elena said. We're leaving. You did this. The attack. All of it. Very perceptive. Elena shifted the vehicle into drive. Now shut up and let me concentrate. We have about 90 seconds before Lucien's men lock down the entire property. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then you'll die here. Your choice. Outside, the operatives were advancing on the vehicle. Elena rolled down her window and fired 3 shots without looking. 2 operatives dropped. The others scattered. Elena hit the gas. The SUV shot forward, tires screaming against concrete. She drove like someone who'd done tactical driving courses. Smooth, controlled, taking corners at speeds that made the vehicle tilt but never lose traction. Mila grabbed the door handle. Let me out. Not an option. I'll jump. At 70 miles per hour? Be my guest. Elena took another corner. They were above ground now, racing through the estate's grounds. Fires burned in the gardens. Bodies lay scattered across the lawn. But if you actually care about surviving the next 10 minutes, I'd recommend staying put. Gunfire erupted from somewhere behind them. Bullets sparked off the SUV's armored exterior. Elena swerved, took a hard left, crashed through a decorative gate, and accelerated onto the private road leading off the property. "Where are you taking me?" Mila demanded. "Somewhere Lucian can't find you." "Why?" "Because you're the leverage I need to destroy him." Elena's voice was flat, mechanical. "I told you to stay away. I gave you every opportunity to walk away clean, but you didn't listen, so now you're collateral." Mila's stomach churned. This was never about warning me. It was about getting close enough to use me. "Congratulations. You figured it out." Elena checked the rearview mirror. Lucien took everything from me. My future, my place in the organization, my chance at the life I'd been promised. So I'm taking the only thing he's ever actually cared about. "You're insane." "I'm practical. There's a difference." They hit the main road. Elena turned north, accelerating past reasonable speeds. Mila's mind raced. The door locks were engaged. She'd already tried them. Elena had a gun. And even if Mila managed to overpower her, they were doing 80 on a dark highway, and a crash would kill them both. She needed another option. "He'll find me," Mila said. "You know he will. Eventually, but by then it won't matter. I'll have destroyed everything he built. The family, the empire, the reputation, all of it. And he'll have to watch it happen knowing it was his obsession with you that made it possible." "That's not revenge. That's suicide." "Maybe." Elena's hands tightened on the wheel. "But I'm taking him down with me. That's all that matters." Mila stared at her. At this woman who'd spent 7 years planning this moment, who'd orchestrated an entire military assault just to get to one person. "You're not going to win," Mila said quietly. "I already have. The second I got you in this car, I won." "No, you just signed your death warrant, because Lucien won't stop. He won't negotiate. He won't trade. He'll hunt you to the ends of the earth, and he won't stop until you're dead." Elena smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Good. I'm counting on it. The angrier he gets, the sloppier he gets. And when he comes for you, and he will, I'll be waiting with every law enforcement agency in 3 states ready to take him down." "You're working with the cops?" "The FBI, actually. They've been trying to build a case against the Moretti family for years. I gave them everything they needed. Ledgers, recordings, witness testimony, all sealed and ready to deploy the second Lucian steps out of line." Mila's chest tightened. "He'll see it coming." "He won't. Because he'll be too focused on getting you back. That's his weakness. It's always been his weakness. He thinks with his heart instead of his head when it comes to you. And that's exactly what's going to destroy him." They drove in silence for 20 minutes. The landscape changed, suburbs giving way to industrial zones, then to abandoned warehouses along the river. Elena pulled into one of them, the SUV's headlights cutting through darkness thick enough to choke on. She killed the engine and turned to face Mila. "Out," she said. "And if I refuse?" Elena raised the gun. "Then I shoot you in the leg and drag you. Your choice." Mila got out. The warehouse was empty except for rats and rust. Elena led her to the back, where a shipping container sat waiting. She opened it with a key from her pocket. Inside was a room, not a prison cell. Worse, a comfortable prison. Bed, bathroom, food, everything Mila would need to survive indefinitely. "Get in," Elena said. Mila's hands balled into fists. "No, it wasn't a request. I don't care. I'm not—" Elena's gun barked. The bullet hit concrete 6 inches from Mila's foot. "Next one goes in your kneecap," Elena said flatly. "I need you alive. I don't need you mobile. Get in." Mila's ears were ringing, her heart hammering. She looked at Elena, at the complete absence of empathy in her eyes, and realized with sick clarity that this woman would absolutely shoot her. She stepped into the container. Elena slammed the door. Locks engaged. Heavy. Industrial. Darkness swallowed everything. Mila stood frozen for a long moment, her breathing too loud in the enclosed space. Then she found a light switch. Fluorescent tubes flickered to life overhead. The container was maybe 10 feet by 20, clean, organized, everything bolted to the floor so it couldn't be used as a weapon. A prison designed specifically for her. Mila sank onto the bed, her hands shaking so badly she had to press them against her thighs to stop it. She was trapped. Miles from help. Being used as bait to destroy the one person who'd spent 7 years keeping her safe. And the worst part was she still didn't know if Lucien had survived the attack. She'd seen him bleeding on the monitors, seen him fighting through the house like a man who had nothing left to lose. What if he was already dead? What if Elena's plan had worked and Lucien was lying in a morgue somewhere while his empire collapsed around him? Mila pressed her hands to her face and tried not to scream. Dumb. She didn't know how long she'd been locked in the container when she heard it. Footsteps outside. Mila shot to her feet, heart hammering. The locks disengaged. The door swung open. Elena stood in the opening, phone in hand. He's alive, and he's exactly as predictable as I thought he'd be. What are you talking about? Elena held up the phone. On screen was a text message. I know you have her. Name your terms. That's from Lucien's personal line, Elena said. He reached out 6 hours after I took you. Exactly like I knew he would. Now comes the fun part. She typed a response. Showed it to Mila. No terms. Just consequences. You have 24 hours to turn yourself in to the FBI. Otherwise, she dies. Mila's stomach dropped. You can't. Watch me. Elena hit send. The response came within seconds. Touch her, and there's nowhere on earth you can hide. Elena smiled, typed, Then I guess you'd better hurry. She pocketed the phone and looked at Mila. Now we wait. He'll either turn himself in and spend the rest of his life in federal prison, or he'll try to mount a rescue and walk straight into a trap that'll put him there anyway. Either way, I win. You're going to get us both killed. Possibly. But at least I'll take him down with me. Elena started to close the door. Wait, Mila said. Why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be revenge. Elena paused. You want the truth? Yes. Because 7 years ago, Lucien Moretti looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth fighting for. That what we had was convenient. That I was just... Her voice cracked. I gave him everything. My loyalty, my love, my future. And he threw it away like garbage the second something better came along. So yes, this is revenge. But it's also justice. He needs to understand what it feels like to lose the only thing you've ever actually cared about. This won't bring you peace. I don't want peace. I want him to suffer the way I did. The door slammed shut, locks engaged. Mila was alone again. She paced the container for hours, her mind spinning through impossible scenarios. Lucien walking into a trap. Lucien dying in a shootout with federal agents. Lucien in prison for the rest of his life, all because of her. Around what she guessed was midnight, no windows, no way to tell time, the container door opened again. But it wasn't Elena. It was one of her operatives, the same ones who'd attacked the estate. On your feet, he said. We're moving you. Where? Somewhere more secure. Boss thinks Moretti might have tracked this location. Mila's heart kicked up. Did he? The operative didn't answer, just grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the container. Outside, 2 more operatives waited beside a van. They zip-tied Mila's wrists, shoved a hood over her head, and threw her into the back. The van started moving. Mila lost all sense of direction within minutes. Couldn't tell if they were going north or south, city or suburbs. Just the sound of traffic and the occasional jolt as they hit potholes. Finally, the van stopped. Someone pulled off the hood. They were in another warehouse, bigger than the last one, empty except for support columns and shadows. And standing in the center of it all was Elena, holding a phone to her ear. Yes, she was saying, I have her. And no, she's not hurt. Yet. A pause. Those are the terms. You turn yourself in, or I start sending pieces of her to your doorstep. You have until dawn to decide. She ended the call, turned to Mila. He's coming, Elena said. I can hear it in his voice. He's not going to turn himself in. He's going to try to be the hero. Which means we need to be ready. Ready for what? For the final act. Elena gestured to the operatives. Set up the perimeter, snipers on the catwalks, explosives at every entrance. I want this place locked down so tight a mouse couldn't get through. The operatives scattered. Elena walked closer to Mila. You're going to help me end this. I'm not helping you do anything. You don't have to. You just have to stand there and look helpless. Lucian will do the rest. He'll walk in here thinking he's going to save you, and the second he does, 20 rifles will light him up like a Christmas tree. The FBI won't let you execute him. The FBI isn't here. They're waiting 3 blocks away with arrest warrants and a SWAT team. But they won't move until I give the signal, and I'm not giving it until Lucian is bleeding out on this concrete floor. Mila's chest felt tight. You're going to kill him. I'm going to make him suffer. There's a difference. Elena checked her watch. 3 hours until dawn. That's how long he has. After that, I start breaking bones until he shows up. You're a monster, Elena smiled. I learned from the best. Us. 2 hours and 47 minutes later, the lights went out. Not slowly, not flickering, just instant darkness. Someone swore. Flashlights clicked on. Then gunfire erupted from somewhere above them. One of Elena's snipers fell from the catwalk, hitting the concrete with a wet crunch. Contact, someone shouted. Multiple hostiles on the upper level. More gunfire. More bodies falling. Elena grabbed Mila, pressed a gun to her temple. Call them off, she screamed into the darkness. Call them off or I blow her brains out. The gunfire stopped. Silence settled over the warehouse like a held breath. Then Lucien's voice echoed from somewhere in the shadows. You're not going to kill her. Try me. You won't. Because the second you do, you lose your leverage. And without leverage, my men will tear you apart. Your men are outnumbered. Are they? Emergency lighting kicked in. Dim, red, barely enough to see by. And Mila's heart stopped. Because the warehouse wasn't empty anymore. Men in tactical gear surrounded the space. Dozens of them. All with weapons trained on Elena's operatives. Lucien stepped out of the shadows. He looked like he'd walked through hell. Blood soaked through his shoulder. His face was pale. But his eyes were burning. Let her go, he said quietly. Elena pressed the gun harder against Mila's head. Not a chance. Elena, look around. You're surrounded. You've lost. Let her go, and maybe you walk out of here alive. Alive to what? Federal prison? A life spent looking over my shoulder waiting for your people to find me? No. If I'm going down, I'm taking her with me. Mila's pulse hammered against her skull. Lucien took a step forward. You want me? Here I am. Trade. Her for me. Isn't that what you wanted anyway? It's not about want anymore. It's about making you hurt. Then you've already won. I'm hurt. I'm bleeding. I've lost 15 men tonight because of you. You've made your point. Not yet, I haven't. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger, and Mila did the only thing she could think of. She drove her elbow backward into Elena's ribs with every ounce of strength she had. Elena gasped, stumbled, the gun jerking away from Mila's head. Mila threw herself sideways. The gun went off. The bullet missed Mila by inches, sparking off concrete. Lucien moved, faster than should have been possible for someone bleeding from a gunshot wound. He closed the distance in 3 strides and hit Elena so hard she flew backward, the gun clattering across the floor. She tried to reach for it. Lucien's boot came down on her wrist. Bones cracked. Elena screamed. Lucien picked up the gun, pressed it against her forehead. His hand was perfectly steady despite the blood still dripping from his shoulder. Give me one reason, he said quietly, why I shouldn't end you right now. Elena's breath came in ragged gasps. Because you're trying to be better. Because Mila's watching. Because you want to prove you're not the monster I said you were. Lucien's jaw worked. You're right. I do want to prove that. He pulled the trigger. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. Elena's eyes went wide. Lucien smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. But not today. He stepped back, gestured to his men. Take her. Make sure the FBI gets her in one piece. Let them deal with her. 2 of his men grabbed Elena, zip-tied her hands, and dragged her toward the exit. She was screaming the entire way. This isn't over. You hear me, Lucien? This isn't... The warehouse door slammed shut, cut off her voice. Silence fell. Lucien turned to Mila. They stared at each other across 10 feet of blood-stained concrete. Then Mila ran. Not away from him, toward him. She hit him hard enough that he staggered, his arms wrapping around her automatically, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him upright. You're bleeding, Mila said against his chest. I know. You got shot. I know. You're an idiot. I know. Mila pulled back enough to look at his face. You could have died. So could you. I'm not. Her voice cracked. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep throwing yourself into danger every time someone threatens me. Yes, I can. And I will. Every single time. Lucian's hand came up, cupping her face. You're the only thing I have worth dying for. That's not romantic. That's terrifying. I know. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But it's the truth. Mila stared at him. At this man who'd killed for her, bled for her, walked into what should have been a death trap, because the alternative was living in a world where she didn't exist. And she realized with stunning clarity that she was done fighting it, done pretending she didn't feel the same desperate, irrational, completely insane thing he'd been carrying for 7 years. She kissed him, hard, desperate, tasting blood and gunpowder and survival. Lucien made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back like he was drowning, and she was air. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. We need to get you to a hospital, Mila said. We need to get you somewhere safe. I am safe. I'm with you. Lucien's expression shifted into something raw, vulnerable. You shouldn't be. You should be running as far from me as possible. Probably. But I'm done running. Mila's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm done pretending I don't want this. Want you, all of you, even the parts that terrify me. Mila, I love you. The words came out rough, honest. I've loved you since I was 19 years old, and I never stopped even when I should have. So whatever happens next, whatever chaos we're walking into, we're doing it together. No more secrets, no more protection. Just... Lucien kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were burning. Together. Together. Around them, Lucien's men were already cleaning up, removing bodies, erasing evidence, making the warehouse disappear like none of this had ever happened. Because that's what they did. That's what Lucien's world required. And Mila was choosing it anyway, choosing him, even knowing exactly what that meant. The hospital was private. The kind of place that didn't ask questions when a man walked in bleeding from a gunshot wound with 20 armed guards surrounding him like a military escort. Mila sat in the waiting room while doctors worked on Lucien, her hands still shaking from adrenaline that refused to fade. One of Lucien's men, Marco, the driver who'd taken her home that first night a lifetime ago, brought her coffee she didn't drink and a blanket she didn't need. He's going to be fine, Marco said quietly. I've seen him walk away from worse. Mila stared at the sterile white walls. How do you do it? Watch him put himself in danger over and over? It's the job. That's not an answer. Marco was silent for a moment. You get used to it, or you don't, and you find other work. But most of us have been with the family long enough to know Lucien doesn't ask us to do anything he wouldn't do himself. That earns loyalty, even when it means people die. Especially then. Marco's expression was unreadable. This life isn't clean. It's not fair. People make choices and live with the consequences. Tonight, 15 of our guys didn't make it home, but 60 more did because Lucien walked into that warehouse knowing it might be a trap. That's the kind of boss you follow into hell. Mila's chest ached. I don't know if I can live like this. Waiting to see if he comes home, never knowing if the next phone call is going to be someone telling me he's dead. Then you should leave. No judgment. This world destroys people who aren't built for it. And if I am built for it, Marco smiled faintly, then you'll figure out how to survive it. Same as the rest of us. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged from the surgical wing. Ms. Hartwell, Mr. Moretti is asking for you. Mila followed him down a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and fear, into a private room where Lucien sat propped up in bed, his left shoulder wrapped in bandages, an IV running into his arm. He looked exhausted, pale, but alive. Their eyes met and something in Mila's chest unclenched. Hey, Lucien said. His voice was rough from anesthesia. Hey yourself. Mila pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. You look like hell. Feel like it too. He tried to smile. It came out lopsided. But I'm still here. Barely. Barely counts. Mila reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. The doctors say you're lucky, she said quietly. The bullet missed everything vital. clean through and through. You'll need physical therapy, but no permanent damage. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Wasn't trying to be. Lucian's thumb traced circles on her palm. How are you? Did Elena hurt you? I'm fine. Scared, angry, but fine. Angry at who? Everyone. You for being reckless. Elena for being insane. Myself for Mila stopped, shook her head. For taking this long to admit I was never going to walk away from you. Lucien's expression shifted. You still have time to change your mind. I don't want to. Mila. I've spent 7 years trying to convince myself I was better off without you, that my life was fine, that I didn't need the chaos you bring. And maybe I don't need it, but I want it anyway. I want you, even knowing exactly what that means. Lucian's hand tightened around hers. It means danger. It means sleepless nights. It means watching me make decisions you might not agree with. It means living in a world where violence is always one phone call away. I know. And you're choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. There's a difference. For a long moment, Lucien just looked at her. Then he pulled her closer, carefully, wincing at the movement, until their foreheads touched. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Promise me something. What? If it ever gets too heavy, if the weight of this life starts crushing you, if you wake up one morning and realize you made a mistake, promise me you'll tell me. Don't suffer in silence. Don't pretend you're fine when you're breaking. Just tell me and I'll let you go. Mila pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. You can't know that. Yes, I can, because I've already lived without you, and it was worse than anything this world could throw at me. Lucian's breath hitched. Then he kissed her, soft, careful, like she was something precious he'd been given against all odds, and couldn't quite believe was real. When they broke apart, Mila rested her head against his good shoulder and listened to his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive, and let herself believe that maybe they could actually make this work. The FBI came for Elena 3 days later. Mila watched the news coverage from Lucien's estate, curled up on the couch in his private study while he worked through paperwork one-handed, his arm still in a sling. Elena was arraigned on multiple charges: conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, weapons trafficking. The prosecutor called her a dangerous criminal who'd orchestrated a violent assault that left 19 people dead. Elena's lawyer called her a whistleblower trying to bring down a corrupt organization. The judge denied bail. Lucien turned off the television. That's the end of her. You sound sure. I am. The FBI has everything they need to put her away for life. And even if they didn't, she made too many enemies. Someone inside will handle her before she ever sees trial. Mila's stomach turned. You're going to have her killed. No, I'm going to let nature take its course. There's a difference. Is there? Lucien set down the paperwork and turned to face her. You want me to protect her? After what she did to you? I want you to be better than her. I can't be better and survive in this world. That's the reality. Then change the world. Lucien laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think it's that simple? No, but I think you're powerful enough to try. He studied her for a long moment. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to use that power for something other than revenge and control. You own half the South Side. You have judges and cops and politicians in your pocket. What if you use that influence to actually help people instead of just protecting your empire? That's naive. Maybe. But it's also possible. You said I was the only thing that kept you human. So let me actually do that. Let me help you build something better. Better how? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together. Lucien was quiet for a long time. Then he reached out and pulled her closer, wrapping his good arm around her waist. You're going to destroy me. Probably, but in a good way. There's no good way to be destroyed. Then let's call it transformation instead. Despite everything, Lucien smiled. You're relentless. I learned from the best. 6 months later, Mila stood in front of a building on the south side that used to be a condemned warehouse. Now it was a community center. Free legal aid on the first floor, job training on the second, medical clinic on the third, all funded through anonymous donations that came from shell companies Lucien controlled. It wasn't redemption. Lucien still ran his empire, still made decisions that kept Mila awake at night, still operated in a world where violence was currency and loyalty was survival. But it was something. A crack in the armor. A small piece of light in the darkness. Mila walked through the center, watching people who looked like she used to look, exhausted, invisible, barely surviving, getting help they desperately needed. Help that wouldn't exist without Lucien's money and influence. "You did this," a voice said behind her. Mila turned to find Marcus, the regular from the cafe, standing in the doorway. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him. Cleaner, healthier, wearing clothes that didn't smell like cigarettes and desperation. "I just suggested it," Mila said. "Lucien made it happen. Still, this place is changing lives. Mine included. Got into the job training program. Start as an electrician's apprentice next week." "That's amazing, Marcus. It's a second chance. Something I didn't think I'd get." He paused. "I heard you're getting married." Mila glanced down at the ring on her finger. Simple, elegant, Lucien's mother's ring that he'd finally given her 3 months ago on a quiet night in the estate's gardens. "Yeah, next month." "He's a lucky man." "I'm not sure luck has anything to do with it, but I'll take it." Marcus smiled and headed toward the job training floor. Mila watched him go, feeling something settle in her chest that had been restless for years. Purpose. She'd spent so long just surviving that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually build something. Lucien found her an hour later, standing in the medical clinic watching a doctor treat a kid with a broken arm. "How's it look?" he asked. "Good. Better than good. We're already at capacity and we've only been open 2 weeks. We'll expand, buy the building next door, double the space." Mila turned to face him. "You don't have to do all this just to make me happy." "I'm not. I'm doing it because you were right. I have power. Might as well use it for something other than destruction." He pulled her close with his good arm. The shoulder was healing, slowly but steadily. "Besides, it's good for business. People on the south side see the Moretti name doing something positive for once. Builds goodwill, makes threats less likely. So it's strategic. Everything I do is strategic, you know that. And the part where you're actually helping people?" Lucien's expression softened. "That's because of you, all of it. You make me want to be better even when I don't think I can be." Mila kissed him. Right there in the middle of the clinic with doctors and patients and Lucien's ever-present guards watching. She didn't care. When they broke apart, Lucien was smiling. "We should go. Dinner reservation in an hour." "Where are we going?" "You'll see." He drove them himself this time. No Marco. No guards. Just the two of them in one of his less conspicuous cars. They headed north out of the city into suburbs that gradually gave way to countryside. Mila recognized the route before they arrived. The lakeshore. The same spot from the photograph. The place where they'd been happy 7 years ago when the world was simpler and the future felt possible. Lucien parked, and they walked down to the water's edge, the setting sun turning everything gold and red. "I've been thinking," Lucien said quietly. "About?" "About what happens after the wedding. Where we go from here." Mila's pulse kicked up. "And?" "I want to start transitioning the family business toward legitimate operations. It'll take years, maybe decades, but I want to build something you don't have to be ashamed of being part of." "I'm not ashamed of." "You should be. Half of what I do is illegal, and the other half is morally questionable at best. So change it. I'm trying, but it means making enemies, taking risks, possibly starting wars with families who don't want things to change. Then we'll deal with it, together." Lucien stopped walking and turned to face her. "You keep saying that, together, like it's simple. It is simple. We choose each other, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And when I fail, when I make decisions you hate, when the blood gets too deep and you can't see the man underneath anymore, then I'll remind you who you are. Same way you spent 7 years watching over me, even when I didn't know it. We protect each other. That's what this is." Lucien's hands came up to cup her face. "I love you. I've loved you since I was 20 years old, and I will love you until the day I die. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This life will never be safe. It will never be normal. There will always be danger, always be threats, always be choices that keep us awake at night. I know, and I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. Even knowing I'm broken? You're not broken. You're surviving. There's a difference. Lucien kissed her. Deep. Desperate. Like he was trying to pour 7 years of longing and regret and hope into one moment. When they finally broke apart, the sun had set and stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. We should head back, Lucien said. Dinner reservation. We should, but let's stay a few more minutes. So they stood there on the lakeshore, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out one by one. And for the first time in 7 years, the weight Lucien had been carrying felt a little bit lighter. The wedding was small, private, held in the gardens of Lucien's estate on a perfect autumn afternoon when the leaves were turning gold and the air smelled like possibility. 50 people attended, Lucien's most trusted men, a handful of Mila's friends from the Café, and Marco, who'd somehow become Mila's unofficial guardian over the past months. No priest, no elaborate ceremony, just a judge Lucien knew who kept the proceedings brief and legal. Mila wore a simple white dress. Lucien wore a suit that probably cost more than the entire wedding, but looked at her like she was wearing diamonds. When the judge asked if they took each other, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death, they both said yes without hesitation. Lucien slid a ring onto her finger. She did the same for him. And then they were married, husband and wife, partners in a life that would never be easy, but would always be theirs. The reception was equally simple. Food catered from local restaurants, music from a string quartet, dancing under lights strung through the garden trees. Mila danced with Lucien, his hand steady on her waist despite the shoulder that still ached in cold weather, her head resting against his chest as they swayed to music that felt like it was written just for them. Happy? He asked quietly. Terrified, Mila admitted. But yeah, happy. Good, because there's no backing out now. Wasn't planning on it. Lucien pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already do. You just don't see it yet. Then I'll trust you to show me. They danced until the stars came out, until the guests started filtering away, until it was just the two of them, and the quiet night, and the future stretching out ahead of them, like an unwritten story. 1 year later, Mila stood in the nursery of the estate's east wing, watching contractors install the final pieces of furniture. A crib, a changing table, shelves for books and toys, and all the things a child would need. Lucien appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. It's starting to look real. Mila rested a hand on her stomach, 6 months along, the baby growing stronger every day. It's been real for a while. Now it's just visible. Are you scared? Constantly. You? Terrified. Lucien moved into the room, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her stomach. I have no idea how to be a father, especially not with the life I lead. Then we'll figure it out together, same as everything else. What if I screw it up? What if I pass on all the broken parts and none of the good ones? You won't, because you're already thinking about it, already trying to be better. That's more than most people get. Lucien was quiet for a moment. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations, promoting some of the younger captains to handle most of the family business. I'll still be in charge, but I want to be present. For you. For this. He pressed his hand more firmly against her stomach. For our family. Mila turned in his arms to face him. You're serious? Completely. I've spent 7 years building an empire. Now I want to build something that actually matters. The empire matters. Not as much as this. Not as much as you. And definitely not as much as the tiny person currently using your bladder as a punching bag. Mila laughed despite herself. Fair point. They stood there in the nursery, holding each other, imagining a future that felt impossible and inevitable all at once. 2 years after that, Mila sat on the floor of the community center's play area, watching their daughter, dark hair, gray eyes, 2 years old and already too smart for her own good, stack blocks with fierce concentration. The center had expanded. 3 buildings now. Legal aid, job training, medical clinic, addiction counseling, mental health services. All of it funded through Lucien's increasingly legitimate business operations. He'd kept his promise, slowly transitioned the family away from the worst of the illegal operations. It wasn't clean, probably never would be, but it was better, and better was enough. Their daughter, Evelyn, named after Lucien's mother, knocked over her block tower and immediately started rebuilding it. She gets that from you, Lucien said, settling onto the floor beside Mila. The stubborn determination to fix what's broken. She gets it from both of us. You just don't see it. Maybe. He pulled Evelyn into his lap. She squealed with delight, grabbing his face with chubby hands. Think she'll hate us when she's older? When she realizes what her father used to be? I think she'll understand that people are complicated, that we make choices we have to live with, that love means showing up even when it's hard. Mila leaned against his shoulder. And I think she'll be proud of what you've built, what we've built together. You give me too much credit. You don't give yourself enough. Evelyn squirmed out of Lucien's lap and toddled back to her blocks, babbling in the half-language of toddlers who were just learning to communicate. Lucien watched her with an expression Mila had never seen before, pure, uncomplicated joy. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. A family, a home, something worth protecting that doesn't involve violence. But you do. And it's real. And it's ours. Yeah. Lucien reached out and took Mila's hand. It is. 5 years after the wedding, Mila stood in the gardens of the estate where they'd been married, watching the sun set over grounds that had become home in ways she never expected. Lucien found her there, sliding his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. What are you thinking about? He asked. 7 years ago, standing in that cafe, watching you walk in like a ghost I couldn't shake. Regret it? Not even a little. Mila turned in his arms. You? I regret leaving. I regret the 7 years we lost. But everything after that? He kissed her forehead. No regrets. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They taught us how to survive together. Mila looked up at him, this man who'd been a boy with paint-stained hands, then a crime lord carved from violence, then something more complicated and human than either extreme. The gray in his hair was more prominent now, the lines around his eyes deeper. But his gaze when he looked at her was exactly the same as it had been that first night, hungry, desperate, grateful, like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to something real. I love you, Mila said. Even when it's hard, even when I don't like your decisions, even when this life feels too heavy. I love you. I know. And I love you. More than power, more than the empire, more than anything I thought mattered before you walked into my life and reminded me what it felt like to be human. They stood there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Inside the house, Evelyn was playing with Marco, who'd somehow become the world's most dangerous babysitter. Legitimate businesses were thriving. The community center was changing lives. The worst of the family's operations had been shut down or transitioned into legal channels. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. A life built from darkness, but no longer controlled by it. And as Lucien pulled Mila closer, kissing her like they had all the time in the world, she realized something she'd spent years searching for. She was home, not because of the estate or the money or the power, but because she'd found the one person who saw every broken piece of her and loved her anyway, and she'd done the same for him. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the empire, not the past, not the mistakes or the violence or the 7 years they'd lost. Just two people who chose each other every single day, no matter what it cost. 10 years after that first night in the cafe, Mila and Lucien stood on the same lakeshore where they'd fallen in love as kids. Evelyn was 12 now, sharp, fearless, asking questions about her father's past that Lucien answered with painful honesty. They decided early on that lying would only make it worse, so they told her the truth about the family business, about the choices they'd made, about the life they'd built from the wreckage. And Evelyn understood. Not completely, she was still a kid, but enough to know her parents were complicated people who'd fought hard to give her something better. She was down the beach now, skipping stones with Marco, who'd retired from active duty but still showed up for family dinners like clockwork. Lucienne and Mila watched her, hands linked, comfortable in the silence between them. "Think we did okay?" Lucienne asked. "I think we did our best. That's all anyone can do. She's going to have questions, hard ones, about things I can't take back. Then we'll answer them, together. Same as everything else." Lucienne pulled Mila closer. "I never told you this, but that first night when I walked into the cafe, I almost didn't. I stood outside in the rain for 20 minutes, trying to convince myself to leave you alone, that you'd be better off without me. What changed your mind? I saw you through the window, wiping down the counter, looking exhausted and beautiful and exactly like I remembered. And I realized I'd rather have one more moment with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Mila's chest ached. "I'm glad you came in. Even knowing everything that came after? Especially knowing everything that came after. Because we survived it, and we built something real from the chaos." "Yeah." Lucienne's voice was soft. "We did." They stood there watching their daughter play, the sun warm on their faces, the water lapping at the shore in steady rhythm. And Lucien Moretti, the boy who'd loved with his whole heart, the man who'd been carved from violence, the father who was learning to be better, finally understood what redemption actually meant. It wasn't erasing the past. It wasn't washing away the blood. It was choosing every single day to build something worth the cost. And looking at Mila, his wife, his partner, the woman who'd walked into his darkness and refused to let him disappear completely, he knew without question that he'd make every choice again, the leaving, the watching, the 7 years of loneliness, all of it, because it led him here, to this moment, to this life, to her. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.